We are witnessing a moment of political and economic theater that is about to redefine the balance of power on the North American continent. What just happened late yesterday in Ottawa is not a routine press release. It is not a diplomatic formality. It is a declaration. And it has the Trump administration, a White House that prides itself on tough guy negotiation tactics, running straight into a brick wall they didn't see coming. Prime Minister Mark Carney's office has released a document they are calling the Canadian Sovereignty Framework. Now, if you only skim the headlines, you might think this is just another trade policy document. You would be wrong. Buried in the language of economic coordination, supply chains, and regulatory alignment is something far more seismic. This is Canada saying no. Not just no to tariffs, no to the entire premise that the United States gets to dictate the terms of existence for its northern neighbor. To understand why the Trump administration is absolutely scrambling, and we are getting reports of some very loud, very angry phone calls coming out of the West Wing, you have to understand the man holding the pin in Ottawa. Mark Carney is not Justin Trudeau. He is not a career politician who rose through the ranks of debating clubs. Mark Carney is the former governor of the Bank of Canada and the former governor of the Bank of England. He is the man who steered the global financial system through the 2008 crisis from his post as chairman of the Financial Stability Board. This is a guy who has spent his career in rooms with the world's most powerful central bankers. He knows exactly how the global economy works. And frankly, he knows where the bodies are buried. The people around Trump, who assumed they could bully Canada into submission by waving a 25% tariff threat around, just woke up to find they are playing a game of three-dimensional chess against a grandmaster. The sovereignty framework does three things simultaneously, and each one is designed to hit the United States where its economic strategy is most vulnerable. First, it establishes what Carney is calling economic red lines. These are specific sectors where Canada will no longer negotiate under duress. We are talking about energy, pharmaceuticals, critical minerals, and this is the big one, water resources. Canada is telling the Trump administration that these are sovereign Canadian assets. They are off the table. They are not subject to the kind of extractive transactional deals that Trump has been trying to force through. Now, why is this making Trump absolutely lose his mind? Because his entire strategy was built on a miscalculation. He thought that by threatening 25% tariffs on all Canadian goods, by floating that deranged idea about Canada becoming the 51st state, he could force whoever followed Trudeau to come crawling to Washington begging for a deal. He thought he could treat Canada like a subsidiary rather than a sovereign nation. But Carney isn't playing that game. And here is what is driving Trump crazy. Mark Carney has something Trump doesn't have: credibility with global financial institutions. When Mark Carney says Canada is going to diversify its trade relationships, that Canada is going to strengthen ties with Europe, Asia, and Latin America, the international community believes him. They believe him because he has done it before. He is the architect of stability. So when Carney says Canada will no longer accept economic coercion from any trading partner, he isn't just talking to Washington. He is signaling to Berlin, to Tokyo, to Seoul, and to Mexico City that Canada is open for business with everyone except those who want to treat it like a colonial possession. Let's talk about how he got here because the context matters enormously. Trump has been using tariffs as a cudgel since his first term. The entire strategy has been based on the assumption that Canada needs the United States more than the United States needs Canada. For decades, Canadian politicians accepted this premise. They negotiated from a position of trying to maintain access to American markets, but what Trump's team failed to grasp is the symbiosis of this relationship. Canada provides the United States with more oil than any other country, more than Saudi Arabia, more than Russia. Canadian hydroelectric power literally keeps the lights on in major American cities. And then there are the critical minerals, lithium, cobalt, rare earth elements essential for electric vehicles and military technology. China has been trying to corner the market on these materials. And the United States has been desperately trying to find non-Chinese sources. Guess where the most reliable, most secure non-Chinese source is? Right across the border. When Trump threatens economic warfare, Carney's response is essentially, let's see how that works out for you. The framework specifically mentions that Canada reserves the right to redirect energy exports to prioritize Canadian electricity needs over American demands. It suggests requiring that critical minerals extracted in Canada are processed in Canada rather than shipped raw to American refiners. This is the nightmare scenario for Trump's economic team. They know that if Canada actually follows through on this, it doesn't just hurt American companies, it gives leverage to China. It strengthens Europe's position. It makes the United States more dependent on adversaries. Here's where this gets really interesting and why I think Carney is playing a completely different game than the one the White House is used to. Within hours of releasing the sovereignty framework, Carney's office announced a series of state visits over the next 6 weeks. He is going to Germany, Japan, South Korea, and Mexico. This isn't routine diplomacy. Look at what he is doing. He is going to every major economy that has also been targeted by Trump's tariff threats. He is building a coalition. Germany is furious over NATO funding demands and threats to European auto exports. Japan is nervous about Trump's unpredictable approach to Asia-Pacific security. South Korea is dealing with the renegotiation of defense cost sharing. In Mexico has been dealing with Trump's threats and insults for years. What Carney is doing is saying to all these countries, we don't have to accept this. We can build trade relationships that bypass American veto power. We can create economic frameworks that don't require us to get permission from Washington every time we want to make a deal. And he has the credibility to pull this off. He knows these finance ministers personally. He has negotiated with these governments before. When Mark Carney calls up the German chancellor and says, let's talk about alternatives to US-dominated trade structures, they take the meeting. They don't hang up the phone. Trump, meanwhile, is stuck in an outdated mindset where he thinks America can just dictate terms because it's the biggest economy. But the world has changed. China's economy is massive. The European Union collectively rivals the United States. And middle-power countries like Canada, when they work together, can create real alternatives to American economic hegemony. I want to spend a minute on something buried in the sovereignty framework that is potentially the biggest deal of all, the section on water resources. Canada holds roughly 20% of the world's fresh water. As climate change accelerates, as droughts become more severe in the American Southwest, as agricultural regions face water shortages that threaten the entire U.S. food supply, Canadian water becomes more valuable than oil. For years, there have been whispers in American policy circles about North American water-sharing agreements. On the surface, it sounds reasonable, but read the fine print and you realize what they're actually talking about is building massive pipeline infrastructure to divert Canadian water to American states, with Canada having limited say over the terms. The sovereignty framework says absolutely not. It declares Canadian freshwater a strategic national resource managed exclusively by Canadian authorities for the benefit of Canadian citizens and ecosystems. It explicitly rules out bulk water exports to any country, including the United States. That might not seem like a big deal today, but think 10 years ahead. Think 20 years ahead when water scarcity is one of the defining geopolitical issues of the mid-21st century. Canada just locked down its position. And Carney is smart enough to know that once you give up control of a resource like that, you never get it back. Trump's people haven't fully processed this yet. But when they do, when they realize Carney just took a long-term strategic objective completely off the table, there is going to be an absolute meltdown inside the White House. Let's address the elephant in the room. Trump's suggestion that Canada should become the 51st state. He floats this idea, sometimes claiming it's a joke, sometimes seeming to actually mean it. His supporters eat it up because it fits a nationalist fantasy. But here is what Trump either doesn't understand or doesn't care about. Canada is not a struggling failed state. Canada has a higher life expectancy than the United States. Canadians have universal healthcare, lower rates of gun violence, lower rates of incarceration, better educational outcomes. The average Canadian has a higher net worth than the average American. When Trump suggests Canada should give up its sovereignty and become part of the United States, what he's really suggesting is that Canadians should voluntarily accept a lower quality of life, more expensive healthcare, and subordination to a political system that half of Americans don't even trust anymore. Carney's response to this has been perfect. He doesn't engage with the premise. He doesn't dignify it with a detailed rebuttal. He just proceeds as though he's dealing with a serious country led by serious people. And in doing so, he makes Trump look even more ridiculous. Every time Trump rants about Canada becoming a state, Carney releases a sophisticated policy framework on economic sovereignty. The contrast is stark. One leader is thinking strategically about his country's long-term interests. The other is ranting on social media at 3,000 a.m. If you're watching this from Canada, I want to talk directly to you for a minute. For years, Canadian politics has been dominated by an anxiety about the relationship with the United States. How do we maintain sovereignty while maintaining economic access? How do we assert our values when they conflict with American policy? Different governments have had different answers. Some tried to be as accommodating as possible, hoping that being a good ally would ensure fair treatment. Others tried to assert independence, but backed down when pressure was applied. What Carney is doing is different. He is not asking for permission. He is not seeking approval. He is making a calculation that Canada is strong enough, connected enough to the global economy, and valuable enough as a partner to other countries that it can withstand American pressure. He is betting that if Canada stands firm, if it refuses to be bullied, the United States will eventually have to come back to the negotiating table on more equal terms. Is that risky? Yes. Could Trump retaliate with tariffs that hurt Canadian industries? Absolutely. But Carney's bet is that Trump will hurt American industries just as much. The American business community doesn't actually want a trade war with Canada. Auto manufacturers don't want supply chains disrupted. Energy companies don't want Canadian oil shut off. Agricultural exporters don't want to lose access to Canadian markets. So, while Trump can tweet threats and impose tariffs, the actual implementation of a sustained economic war against Canada creates massive problems for powerful American constituencies. Carney knows this. He's counting on it. One more thing from the framework that tells you everything about Carney's strategic thinking: the section on regulatory alignment. Instead of talking about aligning Canadian regulations with American standards, which has been the default assumption for decades, it talks about aligning with European Union standards in key areas. Think about what that means. If Canada adopts EU standards for data privacy, environmental protection, and financial regulation, it makes it easier for Canadian companies to do business in Europe. It makes Canada a more attractive partner for European investment. But it also makes Canada less dependent on matching whatever the United States decides to do. This is Carney using his experience from the Bank of England. He saw how European countries, by coordinating policies and creating common standards, exercised more leverage in global negotiations. He's saying Canada can do the same. Canada can be part of a coalition of democracies that sets high standards and forces others to meet them if they want market access. This is a direct challenge to the American model, where Washington sets the rules and everyone else follows. So what happens next? Trump isn't going to just accept this. Based on sources close to the White House, he is demanding that his trade team come up with immediate responses. We are likely going to see tariff announcements within days, possibly on Canadian lumber, possibly on aluminum. There will be threats about energy imports, though actually following through on those threats would cause gas prices to spike in American swing states, which is politically complicated for Trump. There will also be a propaganda campaign. Right-wing American media will portray Carney as anti-American, as ungrateful for security guarantees, as betraying the special relationship. But here is what they are going to run into. Canadian public opinion is overwhelmingly against capitulating to Trump's threats. Carney's approval ratings have actually gone up since he started taking this harder line. Canadians across the political spectrum don't like being bullied. They don't like being treated as a subsidiary, and they especially don't like an American president who talks about their country like it's a piece of property to be acquired. If Trump thinks he can pressure Carney by making threats, he is miscalculating badly. Every threat strengthens Carney's domestic political position. Every insult reminds Canadians why they need a prime minister who will stand up to this behavior. Before we wrap up, we need to zoom out. What is happening between the United States and Canada right now has implications far beyond North America. Every middle power country in the world is watching. Australia is watching. South Korea is watching. Poland is watching. All these countries that have traditionally aligned themselves with the United States, that have operated within American frameworks, are asking themselves the same question. If Canada can stand up to American economic coercion, can we? That is the real threat to Trump's worldview. His entire approach is based on bilateral deals where the United States uses its size to extract concessions from smaller partners. But if those smaller partners start coordinating with each other, start building alternative frameworks, start refusing to negotiate under coercion, the whole model falls apart. Carney understands this. That is why he is not just defending Canadian sovereignty in isolation. He is building a template that other countries can follow. He is showing that it is possible to maintain good relations with the United States while refusing to accept American dominance. If that model spreads, we are looking at a fundamental shift in global politics. A more multipolar world where the United States is one important player among many, rather than the unquestioned hegemon that gets to set all the rules. That is what Trump is really fighting against. Not Canadian tariffs, not trade balances, but the idea that American power has limits. So where does this leave us? We are watching a confrontation between two very different visions of North America. Trump's vision is hierarchical, the United States on top, everyone else accommodating American interests. Carney's vision is cooperative but equal countries working together, but no one subordinating their sovereignty to anyone else. We don't know yet how this plays out. We don't know if Carney can sustain this position if Trump really does impose massive tariffs. We don't know if the Canadian economy can handle the disruption. We don't know if other countries will actually join Canada or if they will decide it's too risky. But what we do know is that this is a defining moment. This is one of those points where the trajectory of history can shift based on who blinks first. And right now, Mark Carney is showing no signs of blinking. I am going to be following every development in this story, every tariff announcement, every diplomatic response, every shift in public opinion, because this matters. This is about whether smaller democracies can maintain their independence in a world where authoritarian-minded leaders want to turn international relations into a protection racket. Please hit the bell icon and subscribe my channel for daily updates.